Watcher Azazel pointed me to this fear-mongering news story about a BDSM group.
Right now, Defender hidden cameras are taking you inside a secret S&M party. Here you can see some men and women are tied up, being whipped. Knives like this one you see are used to tease and dominate.
A Detroit woman named Jane Bashara was murdered, and her husband Bob Bashara has been implicated in this murder.
Bob's wife Jane was murdered January 24th, and investigators have named Bob as a person of interest. Bob's secret life, his relationship with Rachel, and his alleged deep interest and participation in the S&M lifestyle have now become a focus in the murder case. Bob and Rachel were here at this party a week before Jane's murder.
As of this video, Bob Bashara has not been charged with murder, though the person who is being charged with murder has implicated him as the person who hired him to kill her. Even if he were undoubtedly the murderer, though, exploring his fetishes is a tenuous connection at best. Everyone's taste in food is shared with some murderer out there, definitely. But unless their tastes include human liver with a side of fava beans and a nice Chianti, we don't consider that related to moral character. The act of violating another person's inalienable rights is the true immorality here, while what the killer receives physical pleasure from is irrelevant. Killers are humans, after all, and what humans are is mostly mundane. It's not the fava beans and the Chianti that make Hannibal's dish creepy. It's the human part. It's the act of violating inalienable rights, murdering someone, and receiving pleasure from that murder. It's Hannibal's nonchalant attitude toward killing that makes the mundane food he mentions at all creepy. They on their own are not evident of murderous behavior. In Dexter, either the show or the book, I can't recall, there's a part where Dexter goes into detail about the kind of food he likes to eat when driving, and he judges both the flavor he likes and how functional the food is. Like, there's these sandwiches he can hold in one hand, and a banana, that's functional. And just because he's a murderer in the story, it doesn't mean that the food he eats has any kind of moral characteristic to it. It is as without moral value as a similar joke in The Sure Thing, where a guy references a college paper he wrote on the logistics of eating hot pizza. I like bananas, as with the serial killer in the fiction, and I like pizza, as with a non-serial killer character, and both of these are recognized to be without moral value. It's just a statement of what I, as a person, happen to like. Food is understood to be simply an indulgence universal to the human race, and I suspect its inclusion in Dexter is to make people feel uncomfortable as they would relate to him in this mundane thing, and then they'd have to deal with having to relate to a serial killer, even in some mundane matter. On an intellectual level, sex is pretty much just the same as food. Though we technically need food to survive, we don't need to take it to the level of pure art that saturates every human culture. But we all do, because we all enjoy food. While there can be argument against eating to excess, nutrition is not the primary focus of eating in human culture. No one wants a Jetsons type of futuristic, drab world where everyone just pops pills for nutrients. And yet sex is given a very different treatment in American culture, probably due to the strong Christian presence. And it's still taboo to enjoy safe, sane, consensual activities that deviate from the fundamentalist Christian model about only using sex for the specific purpose of reproduction in this socially sanctioned manner. This is where the news story comes from, and connecting BDSM to Bob Bashara's kinda sorta murderer status.
There's nothing illegal about what's happening here. These are all consenting adults.
Listen to how he says consenting adults with such condemnation. This is like how an animal activist would approach a loophole that allows cockfighting. To this reporter, it doesn't matter that it's consensual, because that's not the point. The point is that people are allowed to be edgy while doing sexual things, or sexually charged things, if you want to get technical about it.
Other genitalia has to be covered. No penetration of any kind.
He isn't playing up the angle that submissives are in trouble, so much as, look, there's these people doing weird things, strange rituals, and you don't know what they might do in your neighborhood.
It's also a hall where on other nights seniors gather to play bingo and where people have wedding receptions. Welcome to the VFW Hall in Lincoln Park. Once a month, it's rented by those in the fetish community and transformed into an S&M playground.
By the way, what is up with that cheesy whip sound effect? It sounds like something from the Lord of the Rings movie in the 80s.
In interviews, Bob has been very vague about his involvement in the S&M world.
He doesn't even have to make some claim of immorality. He just draws up this picture of the strange people and lets the viewer's own prejudices fill in the rest. If Bob Bashara had a hobby of going out into the woods to reenact the Revolutionary War, as many do, he would just be seen as kind of a nerd. Play acting killing people is fine. It's boring even, until you connect it to sex. Violence is a part of the human condition. People understand this, so just acting out violence is not a cause for concern. It's the connection to sex that makes it edgy. American culture is rather sexually repressed, and there's this connection with people who are free with their sexuality, who acknowledge their sexual desires and are fine with expressing them, and a lack of self-control. There's this association here. It's the idea that the normal Christian fundamentalist model of restraining one's sexuality is what's moral. So anything else is a slip. It's a sin one commits. So when you've got someone who's freely sexual, you think that they're very immoral because they somehow aren't conforming to this standard of morality. Or at least that's how the American public in general tends to act. This model tends to impact prejudices like racism and xenophobia, where men of foreign cultures are considered greater sexual threats. Like, you know, there's the racist image of the scary black man who is so sexual that he'll rape white women because white people think that white women are the only beautiful women. So he's specifically a danger to the white women. I believe that this is connected to how BDSM here is seen as something relevant to the murder case. The man is considered violent. His extramarital affairs make him considered immoral anyway, but these facts frame him as simply an immoral individual in the American public mindset, connecting him to a weird underground culture where sex and violent imagery are put together. This makes people suddenly afraid of this secret culture that might be encouraging murder, and of course they're pretending to be normal in daily life, so you don't know who might be involved in this secret organization. Woo!
You've got people from every walk of life. You've got homemakers, you've got businessmen.
Of course, the real reason BDSMers aren't open about it is the extreme negative response usually had by most vanilla people.
Question now, was the secret life a motive for murder?
All the alien cultural characteristics seen in the fashion wouldn't exist if it weren't driven underground, where people would only interact with each other. Anyway, there's no story here about a cult, as Click on Detroit almost makes it sound. It's just law-abiding people trying to have a good time on their own without impacting anyone else. This intrusion into their space to force a connection between consensual BDSM activity and murderous behavior will only serve to drive sadomasochistic people farther underground, farther into the closet, and make them feel more bad about being themselves. The whole story reminds me of the bad reputation Wiccans get for having a religion seen as evil by Christians, because some Christian leaders have condemned it as the work of Satan. You know, basically because it's not Christian, and anything not Christian must be the work of Satan, according to some Christian ideologies anyway.
Could it be Satan?
Tyra Banks once had an episode called Mysterious Lives of Witches, where she intended to introduce her primarily Christian viewers to Wiccans. She managed to turn what looked to me like a rather nice religious ceremony into something shocking, with spooky music overlaid, when it was just as mundane and sweet as a Christian marriage ceremony. This was something consensually documented. The Wiccans wanted to put themselves out there to show the world that they're nice people, and they got screwed by post-production. The show was played like Tyra Banks exposing this outlandish culture, and look, they're so shameless. Whereas this BDSM story is like exposing this outlandish culture, and look, they hide right under our noses.
This party is taking place in a quiet suburb of Detroit.
I think it's a relevant comparison because both stories, the witch story and the BDSM story, play on the fear of the other, which is often associated with Satan worshippers in the American public's mindset. In the 70s, 80s, there was this big scare that Satan worshippers were lurking in America, having secret basements underneath daycares, and they were doing horrible things to children and animals. This was largely just made up, no organized Satan worship, but everyone got freaked out because the media had a story, and this nonsense fueled this hatred toward pagans. You know, just because they happen to have some imagery consistent with the public's mindset of their image of Satan worship, which itself is largely born out of Christian medieval imperialism seeking to dominate the world by exterminating all others who were not Christian. The idea that one's own culture must be inherently good and all other cultures are scary is the meme behind every prejudice. And this is what these reporters exploit to generate a buzz. The news gets its ratings by being provocative. If the news doesn't have anything controversial to cover, it'll create controversy. The way that the character Harold in The Music Man generates controversy about a pool in order to then profit off of it. I suspect that Click on Detroit thinks BDSM is disturbing, but not as bad as they're willing to make it sound to generate a buzz. This action represents unethical reporting even without the intrusion, and with the intrusion is just straight up bullying.
They're hoping to learn more about Bashara and his apparent interest in this lifestyle. I'm Local 4 Defender Hank Winchester.
You are a douchebag.